Hi, Anu. Welcome to Winter with Grace.
Hi, Grace. Good to see you.
You have such a impressive track record. To give the audience a little bit background, before joining Stage Two Capital, Anu have worked at ICONIQ's fund, and so basically, I feel like I like last week since we chat last week, I feel like I gained so much insights from you about the go to market strategies and then AI as well as overall basically I feel like your insights on growth, how growth investing changed the way how people look at earlier stage investing. I feel like those are amazing insights. So why don't we start with I will let you introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Anu. I'm a partner at Stage 2 Capital based in San Francisco. Stage 2 is a earlier stage focused VC firm. We typically invest at seed and Series A in B2B startups. And we have a really unique structure. We are backed by at this point, over 500 go-to-market executives in industry that are a phenomenal community. And we love to find ways to support founders by plugging in this community. We're also a unique partnership. Half of our partnership is former go-to-market operators that are now investing, and the other half are folks like me that come from more of a traditional finance and investing background. And as Grace alluded to, I before Stage 2 and doing earlier stage investing, I was on the ICONIQ Growth team, focused on mid to later stage investing across software, fintech, and consumer. And before that, I started my career at Morgan Stanley, focused on technology investment banking.
Amazing. Okay, so first of all, welcome to the show. And then, Mark Roberge was on our Smart Venture podcast very early on. He is such a amazing person in the chief revenue officer space. And I feel like you guys have one of the best LPs. You guys have C levels from Atlassian, Zoom, Slack, Snowflake, ServiceNow, GitHub, LinkedIn, literally every big B2B SaaS company. And I wonder, to start off the show, I would love for you to give the audience a little bit of how is that give you a specific advantage on sourcing deals, because amazing LPs also could potentially bring in a lot of deals, and you guys have the really unfair advantage to see things differently from the go-to-market side. Can you give us a little bit insights on how you guys source deal, as well as how do you kind of filter out the best deal in the go-to-market strategy side?
Yeah, totally. We are incredibly, privileged to have this amazing group of folks in our LP base, and because they're investors in our funds, they're highly motivated and excited to help out in different ways. Like I mentioned, in the post investment side that they support us, but also earlier, right, in referring investment opportunities and introducing us to founders. I think in any given year, in the last few years, we've been anywhere from 30 to 50% of our investments have been sourced slash referred by one of our LPs. And that's really great, because when we have that first meeting with a founder or the founding team, they're coming in with context on us. It's a trusted, oftentimes a trusted relationship, and that definitely can give us an advantage, because we have the benefit of this warm introduction and some context coming into it. The founder may already know one or more of our LPs, and so they also oftentimes understand the value and the types of advice and support that we can bring. And the other really cool thing is we have go-to-market execs in our LP base, but they span so many different domains and end markets. And that means we see also all types of companies, and then also geographies. We have folks that are spread out across the US, also globally. We've made investments. We focus mostly on the US, but we've done some investing in Europe and parts of Southeast Asia, Australia too. And many of these investments were introductions from our LPs.
Amazing. I wonder, okay, so internally, I guess, how do you guys overall separate different LPs bracket? So, I mean, I'm sure your LPs come from different backgrounds. So, I know you invest in HR tech, you invest in hotel related technologies, and these are different bracket of things. How do you separate them into different bracket, and how do you quickly do a market map in that particular market?
Yeah, totally. So on the LP side, we have two operating partners on our team that spend pretty much all their time on engaging with the LPs, the go-to-market
Mhm.
exec LPs, and engaging with our portfolio founders and teams. And that's on the post-investment side. How that works is they know specifically the domains that folks come from. They know the
Mhm.
expertise areas. They also know who might have a little bit more time right now versus who might have said, hey, I'm really heads down. I'd love to engage in 6 months or so. And they
Mhm.
can use that information to then kind of do matching right in the background with the bank. So that's on the post investment side. On the new investment side, we do something similar at any given time based on what space a company is in. You'll either HR tech or hospitality. We have a number of investments there. We've also invested in Office of the CFO
Mhm.
or applications of AI. And for that, we will look at folks, with that right background. I think
Mhm.
for a healthcare focused company, we have folks that have sold into the healthcare market, and we'll bring them in. For a hospitality or for a hospitality type of company, we might leverage an LP who may have been at Toast, for example.
Mhm.
For Office of the CFO, we have some folks from Workday, SAP,
Mhm.
Oracle, which are really, really relevant. So we lean on our two operating partners to support us with the right matching. And then over time, everyone on the investment team also gets to know our LPs really closely, and we have a good sense of who might be
Mhm.
a good fit for a particular opportunity.
Mm, I wonder, so, I feel like that's such a great asset to have, of course. And like right now, like, when it comes to go to market AI space, so what are some trends that you've seen in the space? And then, we have the incumbent companies, they have the data, and like there is a lot of startups that they may not have the data. What's your prediction on like how can startup leveraging their unique advantages to kind of like compete with the incumbent?
Totally. That's a really interesting question. It's one that we are spending a lot of time thinking about, and especially as the market is moving so fast. There's a lot of innovation. Our partner Mark, one of the co-founders of our firm, has written about this topic and also spoken in the past. There's a great blog post on our website if folks
Mhm.
want to check that out. And really, our current thinking is that we have started in the last couple years, and then really with OpenAI launching ChatGPT, then the masses sort of, it being really kind of in everyone's kind of purview. But in the last few
Mhm.
years, we started more with what we call AI co-pilots,
Mhm.
specifically talking about AI as applied to go to market. So for sales
Mhm.
or marketing or customer success. So we started with co-pilots, which we believe are features. And we think that over time, there's an opportunity to go from AI co-pilots to a full displacement. So a full
Mhm.
displacement of certain roles where an AI agent, group of agents, or a encompassing platform technology
Mhm.
can output, the end output, which is a type of job to be done or type of work to be done.
Mhm.
And we're really actively looking at this evolution. We're, to be honest, we are more excited by the opportunity to build displacement and to
Mhm.
build a full autonomous
Mhm.
workflow tool as opposed to just a feature, which we think is the right first step, but over time
Mhm.
it may go into full displacement. So that's kind of the evolution of Copilot to displacement. And then specifically on the data side, it's a tricky question because you would believe that incumbents have an advantage here because they have likely
Mhm.
the most amount of data.
Mm.
What startups possess, however, is typically the best AI talent. And
Mhm.
and an example that this is an example that Mark often gives is back in, let's say, pre 2000 or sort of late 90s, early 2000s, there weren't that many Java developers. And
Mhm.
if you were a Java developer, you were in demand and you likely wanted to work on an innovative technology versus at some existing incumbent where people are coding in COBOL or Fortran or one of those
Mhm.
more legacy languages. And then the same thing's happening now. If you are, one of the most cutting edge AI focused developers, you have a really strong grasp on LLMs, foundation models, definitely Python, amongst other more modern languages. And so you will gravitate towards startups. You want to work on things that you have a vision for versus, what the vision is of like an executive at an incumbent or a board at an incumbent. And so where startups can really have an advantage is like the best AI talent. So think of like the A plus talent. And then on the data side, startups have to figure out where are there spaces where incumbents may not have that data, or it's sort of open white space to get new forms of data. And I think examples of that might be, if you look at in the go-to-market space, who has really good, like CRM companies have a lot of data on their customer interactions, their customer databases. But what they didn't have so much data on is kind of interactions, conversational interactions, or opportunities for coaching or feedback. And that's where really some of these startups can get ideas of where are their data sets that may not be at the incumbents. And then you sometimes just innovate on product. You have the ability to move really fast. There isn't that much overhead. And that's, I think, the other opportunity to differentiate is by building really good product, being the most AI native, and looking for any way to differentiate on data as well.
I wonder, like, how do you, because I think we just chat about like, the, the startups, although like, big tech company have a lot of data, but startups also have some sort of like unique advantages. And then, but like one of the things that you mentioned, like, startup may be facing is like hiring the best talents. Like, how do they beat with, like, not beat, but like, how do they compete with, the OpenAIs of the world or like other really interesting startups? Like how do you figure out like if the CEO can attract the best talent? And in terms of like AI, I feel like after seeing many AI startups, I feel like the technical mode is getting really like interesting because like a lot of things were based in what OpenAI does. So OpenAI is kind of like the engine of the ecosystem, and then like everything is built up on top of it. And then I'm sure there's like other open sourced model can kind of like do the same function later on, but like or like now, but like in general, I feel like people are building based on these like really giant um engines. So I wonder, how do you kind of like see if a company can succeed from like a technical mode perspective as well as like the go-to-market perspective?
Yeah. I think two sort of related questions there. Number one, on how can startups compete with incumbents, especially with the types of compensation that is available at incumbents. And this is something where over the last 20, 30 years, the current incumbents who really grew in the last, call it 10 to 15 years, have really wisened up, right? And they've realized that to retain and attract the top talent, they will have to continue paying top dollar. And so I think you will certainly have folks that gravitate towards that. They gravitate towards the potential stability and a high compensation package. However, at the same time, in the last couple of years, people are seeing that it's not always as stable as one might think. A number of really amazing companies, unfortunately, perhaps grew too fast, and then I had to bring down headcount. There's changing market conditions. There's different pressures, especially as public companies. You have different pressures, right, on kind of what innovative groups within the company can you continue investing in versus sometimes you have to pull back investments. And so because of some of that instability, I think folks are being attracted by startups because they realize it's going to be potentially risky and unstable no matter what. So why not join somewhere where there is a lot of upside to be had? And especially in some of the more established tech ecosystems, such as San Francisco, Silicon Valley, New York, I think people understand the value of equity. I recently saw a great article from Pave talking about, which is the compensation benchmarking company, talking about how, especially in established markets, equity benchmarking and equity is understood really well. And so people gravitate towards that because they think, I know people that were either early employees or were angels in companies like Snowflake or Databricks, which or Stripe, right? And in the case of Snowflake, they've seen exits. In the case of the Databricks or Stripe, there is likely one soon to be had. So that's kind of on what attracts folks on kind of the compensation. And then there's also just autonomy, which is what people often like. And then on the second point, or second question around, what do we look for, or how do you distinguish, right, between what's built on top of existing technology, existing models, either foundation model, right, or multiple models versus what you build uniquely. I think the jury's still out on this one, and it's not perfectly clear. There is some general thinking that the infrastructure layer of companies, such as OpenAI and other foundation models like Cohere or others, for example, will derive a lot of value, and they will kind of be the the picks and shovels, to use that traditional finance analogy, or the toll road, right? And they'll do really well. And so for companies that are built on top, we have to think about, is there differentiation to be had by being technically really different? Or is it differentiation in the way the product's architected, the workflow that's enabled, and by combining multiple types of infrastructure? So the LLM or the models, but also the data, how you ingest the data, how you work with the data. Maybe it's the model fine-tuning, or kind of the data inference that's happening that makes it differentiated. And in which case, that's going to be it's not the most technically complex. It's not as complex as building a foundation model from scratch, but it is sophisticated and sufficiently complex that there can be differentiation. Versus, I think, if people are just an API on top of ChatGPT or something similar, right, and they've just created a cosmetic kind of difference, then that's not as exciting. Especially if we think that, hey, like OpenAI or one of their competitors could just do this themselves, versus where OpenAI isn't spending their time on gathering healthcare specific data or energy pricing data, especially those things that are either behind paywalls or behind they're just not public data sets, right? And so I think where folks can have unique data sets, or where folks can build really unique workflows that either are multi-model or have really specific fine-tuning and inference going on, there can be differentiation there.
I wonder, what are some interesting company you've seen in the space? By the way, hi Ben, we're gonna address your question to Anu later. So I wonder, what are some interesting startups you've seen in the space recently? And then, you have invested in different sectors. Like, how do you, what does your current mental model look like? What are some, let's say, 3 big bracket you're thinking about right now?
Yeah. So let's see. First question on what are some exciting companies in the space we've seen, and then number 2, what are either the mental models or maybe the categories of
totally categories.
Yeah. I think on the first point, I definitely have to kind of give a shout out to one of our portcos, DeepScribe, which is building AI technology in the healthcare space. They're doing AI transcription and note taking for doctors' conversations, and it's been really exciting to watch them grow their data set. They have a very specific data set, which gets their model gets better every time there's a conversation between a healthcare provider and a patient, and so that kind of hits some of those themes we talked about, right? Where there's a unique data, there's highly motivated early team members that have joined. And so we continue, like, one of the buckets and categories of real interest is how can AI be applied to healthcare and life sciences in general, everywhere from patient doctor interactions to potentially drug discovery to go to market tooling for folks that are selling into life sciences, etc. So that's a little bit of a jump into that second question. Other exciting companies we've seen recently, we haven't. We actually, I take that back. We've made one investment in a go-to-market AI company that I'm quite excited by. This company called Tofu.
The
Yeah.
founder is coming onto the show soon.
Oh, amazing.
Elaine?
That'll be great. Yeah. And so Tofu is building AI for marketing automation specifically. And what the thesis there is that, traditionally, like marketing has been one to many. But what
Mhm,
if you could, through AI and the automation that it provides, do marketing one to one, right? And
mhm,
we're early in that journey, but the idea is that Tofu can basically help marketers build custom landing pages that are
mhm,
AI generated. And for any specific audience, depending on where they're coming from or what they're looking for, you can have the right landing page for the right audience. There's going to be the right content in terms of
mhm,
blog posts or PDFs or collateral,
mhm,
right? And those are the types of ideas that the Tofu is building on, which are
mhm.
really exciting.
I
Um,
wonder
yeah,
when you're doing due diligence on, let's say, Tofu or like the healthcare startup, like I wonder, so number one is like when you mentioned the healthcare startup, they have like a unique data set. How do they acquire the data set? So like typically I hear these pitches of like a someone coming out of an industry and then they are like they have machine learning or like AI background and then they or like not AI, like they have like some sort of like engineering background and then they basically they're saying yeah, like it's really hard to break into a certain like their industry and then to acquire the data. But on the other hand, I feel like just leaning onto the 2 or 3 relationship that you have, it's really hard to for a go-to-market strategy on like a repeatable basis. Like so basically like yeah, sure, like the 2 people from your past employer
right.
and how do you kind of like scale that to acquire the data set or like is data set is not important, you just need to like a one very comprehensive one to give you an idea of how things work instead of like you basically try to get as much as possible. I wonder how do you kind of think of on that end. And
Yeah.
then yeah, I can save the tofu question later, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll
So
start with this one. So, if I remember correctly, DeepScribe started with a publicly available data set,
mhm,
which had either been open source at Google or maybe in the academic community. So I don't perfectly remember that, but they did start with a base level.
mhm,
And then what the unique insight was is that this base model can be expanded and fine tuned.
mhm,
And DeepScribe started with what's known as human in the loop initially, which is it's not a fully automated kind of model training process. You have, in DeepScribe's case, they had medical scribes that will review what is generated by the AI note summarization tool, and they will look for errors and improve them or see where edits are needed. And that
mhm,
process over time improves the accuracy and the automation level of that base model. So you take a base model or multiple models, right, that are combined, and then you fine tune them, and you have like human reinforcement, basically, of those models, and that's the part, right, that incremental part that becomes proprietary and also gets better as there are more customers on the platform, more users, as there are more conversations between
mhm,
medical practitioner and the patient. That model then gets better and better. And at this point, I believe DeepScribe thinks that they have the sort of the largest and most accurate data set for patient doctor interactions. And it may, I'm not sure if it's for all categories in healthcare. Definitely for a few, it might be for all, which is pretty cool. So that's kind of how you can build, like, you can take open source data and then make it your own and make it proprietary. Um, yeah.
yeah, I was literally just like I think before our conversation yesterday, I was doing research on the data side. Like so basically synthetic data can augment fine tune. Um like basically I feel like the data clean up the data is like a very important piece and I feel like that can kind of like separate a good company and a great company to a degree. And I wonder like in terms of like the technical diligence, how do you do technical diligence on these things because from coming from like a financial background, I don't know if you're technical or like self educated technically, but I feel like it's really hard to understand some of the concepts in AI. Like I feel like I myself is in the
Yeah.
process of taking online courses to advance this thing, but like the problem is like I guess I wonder like how do you quickly do diligence in terms of the technical perspective?
Yeah, and it's really hard, and I think we across our team can keep getting better at this. We are across our team and myself personally, I'd say we have maybe different levels of like base to rudimentary, and in some cases, one of our colleagues has a little bit more advanced knowledge, and when it comes to really technical ideas and
Mhm.
technical concepts. And so I think we lean very heavily on, of course, listening to the founders and their teams and hearing
Mhm.
what they're saying. And then how do we validate that? So at stage two, we're typically investing once there's early customers. And so what we can do is we can go talk to these early customers and hear
Mhm.
from them directly in terms of like how are you using the product and what is the value. So that can give us some comfort on at least as a product doing what it's meant to do.
Mhm.
And then we also lean on folks in our community. We have a lot of go-to-market executives as in our LP base, some of whom were at technical companies or are at technical companies. You
Mhm.
alluded to a few of them, right, in their introduction. And so we can lean on them as they definitely have a more deeper understanding of a lot of
Mhm.
these concepts and tools. And then
Mhm.
at other times, we also will lean on other folks just in our broader network to help out. But it is hard, it's tricky, and I'd say we are more customer first in our diligence and our evaluation. I don't think we can say that we are perfectly 100% comfortable that we understand the technology and technical insights, especially for some of these extremely innovative cutting edge tools where
Absolutely. Yeah.
they're on the bleeding edge. It's kind of like when quantum physics was first being derived, there was maybe like
Mhm.
5 people who could understand the papers. We're not quite
Mhm.
there. I think there's likely hundreds or maybe in the thousands
Mhm.
of folks that may be really deeply entrenched within AI technologies. However, it's a relatively small number, right, to the entire tech and investing ecosystem.
Yeah, I completely agree with you because I feel like AI changes really fast. Like the technology as well as like the adoption changes really fast and then the trends change really fast. It's really hard to actually be super advanced at all time. And I wonder, like, I really like what you said about like, you guys are customer first. Um, like when you're doing due diligence with a startup, of course they're gonna give you like, okay, here are like top three clients. Obviously, they're gonna say amazing things because they shop there, or like maybe they just have like amazing friends who are, created another startup. Like, so and then like, they could say good things. How do you kind of like do the background check on these things?
Yeah, we will certainly talk to folks that are introduced by the teams themselves, and then we also try and have some conversations independently. And we can do that by, sometimes we reach out to people directly. Other times we get introduced to folks just through, our kind of second degree, third degree connections. And then we also leverage some of the expert networks that are, that investors often use as well as a good way of getting to either customers or getting to folks in particular domains and industries where they may have a perspective on that specific product or company.
I wonder, like, I feel like it's hard to, like, I guess, like, how many people do you have to chat before making an investment? Because I think, especially in the AI space, people move really fast. Um, like, although we're not in the best market right now, like, so I guess, like, as investors, there's an advantage to that. But how do you, like, I mean, because we have to make decisions based on imperfect information. What's your diligence process like? Let's say, how many people do you have to check
Yeah,
in before you have the conviction to invest into something?
yeah. It's tricky because it will often be different, and we
Mhm.
will try like more the better, right? But there's a trade
Mhm.
off on how much time there is, and also typically a lot of fundraise processes are time bounded. And so
Mhm.
if we can talk to at least 10 folks, that's great. Between our LPs that we involve in diligence, between the references directly from the founder and just some of our independent conversations, that it's like a nice round number that start
Mhm.
giving enough sort of in for insights.
Mhm.
So that's maybe like a number to keep in mind. Certainly, there have been times when it's a bit less, and there's been times when it's been a lot more. But that's kind of the level that we're trying to go for.
Totally. Okay. So in terms of the mental map for AI space, so, I've jotted down some notes of like things that I've seen, AI have kind of created a new ecosystem of tools. So there's like the AI ops tool and then like for like AI engineers and then data curation tools for, improving models. And then there's like the fine tuning model. And then there's like LLM ops and vector DBs. I mean, obviously, I'm very new to the technical knowledge, so this is just like things I've seen in the market or like how from like other reports I've read. So I wonder, in your mind, from a go-to-market perspective, what is like the top three category?
In terms of which categories are seeing a
Like
lot of
will be
traction, or
change the most by AI.
which categories are being changed the most by AI? Okay,
Yeah,
that's
or like where you identify as like the biggest opportunity from a go-to-market perspective.
yeah, yeah, makes sense. So definitely go to market itself has a really big opportunity to be transformed by AI.
Mhm,
So we can talk about that in a moment. I think the other areas are around just software creation, and so
mhm,
AI as applied to software development, software
mhm,
testing, and software DevOps, sort of as a kind of spectrum. So that's
mhm,
really transformative. And then
mhm,
I feel like AI is going to be so deeply transformative across industries. But maybe if to put a blanket all over them, sort of just AI applied to really traditional industries, right? So the ones that are being digitized for the first time, AI can be applied there to complete specific workflows and tasks. Anything that is like digital and information dependent. So things we're already seeing, right? Things like in travel, itinerary
mhm,
planning can all be done by an AI. Travel booking can be done by an AI. So like travel is definitely, I think, going to be disrupted by AI.
mhm,
We're also seeing things around in industrial use cases, so monitoring of systems, auto remediation, right? If you think about sensors and controls in industrial production, that we're seeing is where AI is being applied. So I wanted to use kind of industrial applications as a blanket. I did also include travel, which is not industrial, so I did
mm.
one extra.
Awesome. So I like those three categories, like go to market itself, and then travel, and then industrial. Let's start with like go to market itself, since you guys are a go to market fund, and I wonder, like, how do you see AI improve during in basically in this category, and then what is like maybe. I know that maybe don't name names, but like what are some companies that I don't know if you can name names, but you can also name names. Like, what are
Right.
some companies that you feel like are doing a great job in this category?
Totally. So I named one of our purpose, which is easy to do, and so definitely in marketing, I think this concept of marketing one to one, that
Mhm,
is really going to evolve over time, and there's an
mhm,
opportunity going from account based marketing to like persona based marketing
mm,
and individual based marketing. So that's one evolution we're seeing. Another category that we're spending time in, where I think there's a number of companies building in it, is the opportunity to evolve from just supporting an SDR. So, like a sales development representative or a business development representative, right? There's a number of
mhm,
co-pilot tools available to help them very quickly generate emails or path sequences or automated sequences. I think
mhm,
the evolution is going to be some companies that are able to provide AI agent that can
mhm,
do all of that. The AI can surface up the right prospects.
mhm,
AI will know what are the kind of like the persona that is relevant, what are some of the information that's available on the internet, right? You might be able to plug into LinkedIn or news sources, see what's going on, and then help automate the outreach. So that's going to
mm,
be a almost like a account executive in the form of an AI. I think that's
mm,
possible. And
mhm,
then also something a little bit in between. So not exactly a co-pilot, but
mhm,
what one could call like a ride along, right? Somebody that's
mhm,
effectively with you in the metaphorical car. So a sales engineer type of AI role, which can help answer questions that come up. So, there might be a human-to-human interaction where a buyer has questions like technical questions, or they have questions from their compliance team, and
Mhm.
the human individual may not know exactly what the answers are, or they're very nitty-gritty, but there's
Mhm.
like AI agent right on this call that can
Mhm.
help answer those questions, or help
Mhm.
maybe in a customer success type of setting there, taking in notes, or maybe offering up
Mhm.
suggestions, customer support, customer success, exactly, where you can like help answer questions and resolve issues. I think that's going
Mhm.
to be also a really interesting opportunity for AI. And then,
Mhm.
yeah, I think I'll pause there. Those are a couple that we've seen a lot of, or I wouldn't say a lot of, but we've seen some exciting companies building in these spaces.
Mm. I think one of the things I'm interested learning about is like, how do you think of these companies' business model in terms of like the go to, like when you mentioned about, let's say, a company that helps you generate better email or like supporting SDRs, right? So let's say you and I have a conversation, and then this let's say this app can help us to generate like meeting notes, or like help you like draft the email to follow up with your client. Um, like I've seen so many of this things that does the same function. How do you quickly tell who's gonna win in that category?
Yeah, we often talk about and think about what is the moat of this particular company, and
Mhm.
what is the disruption potential by either an incumbent or a net new startup. And so in the case of a AI note taker, if
Mhm.
the work that's being done is just summarization, and
Mhm.
the conversations that are being had are very general, generic conversations that are sort of all encompassing, there
Mhm.
is a risk, right? There is a risk that every X number of months or years, a better language model will come about, and like
Mhm.
basically whoever is there's more disruption because it's so generic.
Mhm.
It's very different in a specific like a medical field, right? Or I think that's probably the best example where it's like highly specialized, and there you can
Mhm.
have differentiation and a moat. Um, but for general purpose, I think it can be really tricky for AI note takers. Just an AI note taker to have a note. In fact, we recently observed that Zoom has launched its own AI summarization features,
Mhm.
and they are really, really good. In fact, they're
Mm.
better than some of the standalone apps that folks on our team have used, right? And so
Mm.
that's scary if you are building a AI note taking app. And so I think startups will have to figure out, are they just building a feature, or are they building a platform? Are they solving one particular workflow that can very
Mhm.
quickly be done by someone else? There's also not that much switching cost or
Mhm.
stickiness, because there's not really that many insights. Like once you've stored the conversation, you've stored it, and you may go back to it, but you can kind of very quickly go to a different app and start your AI
Mhm.
summarization thereafter. So that's a really good example of a feature, not a platform. And so we think really hard about who's building a platform versus a feature. So just email writing or just sequencing is in today's world more of a feature versus a all-in-one, right? A AI agent that is prospecting, doing research, surfacing up the insights, and then also either taking an inbound call and doing the call, or being one of the kind of ride along agents, right? And supporting a call with offering insights or answering questions. That seems really technically deep, and there is also potentially a moat there, because you're connecting data sources and data sets, both external and internal, to this AI agent, and so that starts becoming harder to just bring something
Mhm.
new in, because there's also learning that's happening on the
Mhm.
internal data sets as they're combined with external data sets.
I wonder, I really like what you said about, depending on if they're building a platform or a feature, right? So like basically that's like the add-on function to the current like note-taking ability of this app. I wonder, like, let's say if they're building for, I don't know, like for let's say uh Series B startups trying to sell a product to the big incumbent, and then this app does exactly that. Like for every meeting, we're talking about like, specific very specific email generation to that specific sector, assuming the Series B startup have some sort of money because of they are not like in the struggling seed stage anymore, and then they are like already have some momentum trying to scale. Assuming like there's money there, and I wonder, how do you kind of evaluate a tool that's built in that specific sector? It's not like it's not like the healthcare
Hmm.
industry, because healthcare industry is, I assume it has a, you have to have a really high mode to basically sell yourself to all these hospital, right? Like you have to have some sort of hospital connection
Yeah.
to sell, right? Or like people working in healthcare or whatever, like basically you have to have a unique go to market strategy. But for like a more generalized but not super generalized crowd, it's not like Zoom, you're selling to everybody on Zoom, and
Yeah.
then you're selling this specific thing to solve a specific problem for this specific group of people, like SDR at Series B companies. um how do you, like, what do you think about this value proposition compared to, like, I mean, I feel like they can potentially make some money, but are they gonna be the life-changing AI tool that's like the next Uber? Probably not.
Mhm.
So, would you, like, I guess, like, how would you evaluate if it's like a good bet or not?
I think besides thinking about is there a strong moat, we'll do a little bit of what you're alluding to, right? Which is just think about what's the market size potential for this
Mhm,
company, and we're actually we're very comfortable investing in specific functional areas or specific verticals, which
mhm,
are going to be a lot smaller by definition than very horizontal companies,
mhm,
and that's okay because typically what you find in like a vertical or domain specific software is that you can, as a winner in that market, or number one or number two player, you can get to really high penetration of that market. So
mhm,
that's a little sidebar on, we're comfortable investing in both horizontal and vertical or domain specific software
mhm,
companies, and we think about, yeah, what's the market potential. If it's vertical or domain, market size does matter quite a bit, and we think about what's the applicability, and is there staying power, right? Because is there stickiness, and is there going to be retention of this tool? And so we look for early signals of product usage, and I'd say pre AI being kind of so central, we would say we look at product usage, like time spent, number of interactions, whatever like the product KPIs are, as signals of leading indicators of retention, which is part of kind of Mark on our team and State Street General philosophy, right, on science of scaling. Um, but when the AI first world, we have to think about not only like product interaction, but we have to think about product value and what's the job that's being done by the
mhm.
software, and is that being done successfully, and is that going to have continuing staying power, or is it like likely to get disrupted?
Mm. When you're looking at the team, I feel like in early stage, everyone's like, "Oh, let's look at the team, the team, the team." So when I look at the team, so sometimes I saw like, a person that I know for a long time, they're like obviously hustling with their career, like they're doing amazing things. That's why you're kind of considering investing in their company. But on the other hand, you are not super aware of where they stand in the entire ecosystem. And on the other hand, there is like the super, a veteran from like basically the chief XYZ officer from like pretty hot startup or whatever left. Or like maybe like, let's say if they come from like a good traditional B2B startup instead of like an AI startup, but they're building like an AI tool right now. And like, how do you kind of evaluate these two type of team building
Yeah.
people? Yeah.
Ideally, there's a combination,
Mhm,
and that's what we like to observe is when there's perhaps somebody on the founding team or early team that came from a background where they saw what good looks like, what success looks like, and they're
mhm,
partnered with someone who is a very technical technology first individual that either has background in research, or they were building the predecessors to the modern AI tools, either machine learning background or something similar. And
mhm,
if you like pair those two, that can be a really powerful combination because you're getting a really incredible technologist partnered up with perhaps someone with a more of a go-to-market bent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we look for like really complementary skill sets,
Mm-hmm.
and Tofu is actually a really good example of that, where EJ and Hong Lei on Tofu's team are coming from really deep technical backgrounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Facebook and Affirm, for example, is in their backgrounds, and they're partnered up with Elaine, who has been a go-to-market operator in the past. She was also a venture capitalist. So you have this really cool combination of like really deep technical expertise mapped together and matched together with go-to-market and operating expertise. So I think that's something that we're going to look for. Not every team is going to resemble that. I don't think every team has to resemble that. It's nice when that happens. And other times, I think we have to just find and sort of either through the demonstration of a product that's built that's seeing a lot of value from the customers, and we hear that, or by like listening to the founders and hearing the insights that they have. Do we believe that the insights that they have on their view of the world or of a domain or how workflow should be done is sufficiently differentiated and unique?
I really like what you said about like, having team member and like basically who has the technical insight as well as like go to market fit. So I wonder when like, okay, so let's jump into like the second big trends, which is like travel, right? Like how will AI change the travel industry? Also, I feel like travel is a really interesting place because it's like based like a lot of like based on like consumer related things. So basically like, imagine who's booking a travel is probably just like a regular person, right? I feel like anything touch up on consumer instead of B2B is hard to predict. And I assume you're talking about like, travel itinerary are like generated by AI. Let's say you want to go to the Bahamas tomorrow and then like, gave me a 7-day trip plan and then like gave me the cheapest ticket and like the best hotel and went with the best value or whatever. Okay. So assuming ChatGPT can do some of that. And what is the mode for these like travel founders in their different companies
Yeah.
to kind of like help them succeed?
Yeah. I would, I think I'd specify, I was thinking of travel really from just like a consumer and
Mhm.
personal background. To be honest, I'm not sure if like what the opportunity set is going to be like for a B2B company versus a B2C company.
Mhm.
I think maybe the opportunity set is around just similar to like how the OTAs like came about, right? In sort of
Mhm.
Gen 1 and Gen 2 of the internet. And it was whoever had like the best inventory, really. And then
Mhm.
it also became like just distribution, right? Was like initially some people had better
Mhm.
inventory, either on hotels or flights, and then over
Mhm.
time many different companies were accessing the same inventory,
Mhm.
but they just had different like consumer distribution. So I think
Mhm.
that same might happen here, where there may be some early differentiation based on who has the best API access, who has like the most data on airlines versus hotels versus other like cruises or other types of experiences. And
Mhm.
then ultimately it'll be who has like the best consumer distribution. And I
Mhm.
think unlike like in the early days of the internet, I think incumbents are wanting to stay really on top of what's happening, and companies like Expedia are
Mhm.
offering, hey, here's like AI built itinerary, and we have agents that are on top of OpenAI, but are able to like book you your flights and hotels and everything. So
Mhm.
um, for a new entrant into the space, I'm not sure what the opportunities are, but this is also why consumer businesses are created by people that just reimagine the world, right?
Mhm.
I oftentimes feel that B2B, like you build for problems that you observe, and people understand those problems, and you kind of find a better way, more efficient, right? You either drive more revenue or you save costs,
Mhm.
and you do that. But in consumer, people like reimagine the world, the way that Uber
Mhm.
reimagined how people are going to travel, right, through cars, and Airbnb
Mhm.
reimagined how people are going to stay. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think consumer founders they often come from places where like it's hard to predict.
Mm. What are some like since you mentioned about this trend, so like what is something that excites you? What have you seen as like people who reimagine the world and like you feel like that's compelling?
I think in go-to-market AI specifically, it's folks who really think that we can go from co-pilots to full autonomous AI agents, right? And sometimes we've even talked about this notion of like AI buyers and AI sellers talking to each other effectively
Mhm.
to sell and buy a product. That's really cool, really exciting. At the same time, it's also a little worrisome. I think as a industry, we are typically reactive on the societal impact of
Mhm.
technologies, and it's one where I don't have any strong views at the moment, but I hope over time as an industry, we figure out what is the impact as well when you have things like pure displacement technologies.
Mm. What is like so I guess like what is like an interesting use you have seen that in the travel space like excites you besides like automatically book trip somewhere or what does it look like for let's say like a company that you feel like wow that's like a really interesting way to think about things.
I don't think I've come across one yet. The itinerary piece is probably the like I think that's like the leading example of
Hmm.
where travel is being disrupted. But I'm not quite sure yet where else there might be opportunities.
Okay, so we're moving on to the third part, which is like the industrial part, right? Like you mentioned about like monitoring sensor and control. Like, what is the AI revolution like in that sector?
Yeah, I think it's what some of the things we've seen and what we believe is you can take away the need for really at sometimes dangerous or time consuming or manual workflows, and you can replace that with AI and sometimes a combination of some really specific hardware plus AI, right?
Hmm.
And so there's this whole notion of edge computing and AI deployed to the edge, which is really really interesting in industrial applications. It could be through computer vision applications. So one interesting application of computer vision at the edge is like either maybe in a warehouse as there are returns coming or new packages being shipped or new products being shipped.
Hmm.
AI computer vision is going to be a lot better at finding defects and doing that fast and being able to
Mm.
route things to the right place versus if humans or teams of humans have to do it. So that's in a warehouse. I've
Mhm.
heard about AI being deployed in large chemicals tanks or fuel tanks, right, where you have sensors that are monitoring changes, and some of these like materials are extremely sensitive to changes in pressure, heat, uh, things like that, and humidity, right? And so you have like sensors that are taking in all the data, but the AI
Mhm.
application on top is what do you do when suddenly you have things that are changing, right? Or there's alerts and you need to do remediation. And I think AI has the opportunity to do remediation in some of these industrial settings, which is really cool. Um, we've in some ways had like some basic AI when it comes to things like autopilot, right? On planes, we're
Mhm.
now getting it obviously on cars as well.
Mhm.
So that's a form of industrial, I think, transformation as well, right?
Mhm.
Of just machines being run autonomously, right, without humans. We're probably not going to get too deep into this today, but AI in the defense industry, that's also pretty transformative in how that reshapes how things go.
You mentioned about edge computing, and can you elaborate more for the audience who are not super familiar with the term?
Yeah, so edge computing basically means computing oftentimes as enabled by cloud that's happening on devices that are call it remote, right? It's not on a computer or desktop or typical office application. It's happening in a warehouse where there's sensors. It could be maybe security cameras, could be things like I mentioned, temperature sensors, humidity sensors, and they're basically deployed potentially outside of like an office or home network. and it's and oftentimes will also require special connectivity, right, to make it work.
Mm. Like, what is the application there? Like, because I wonder, what is the relationship with AI between like edge computing and AI?
The relationship is, I think, similar to general AI. It's
Mhm,
just instead of like interfacing with this AI on, during our like desktop or
mhm,
mobile, right, conversation, it's
mhm,
AI that's running autonomously in, call it like what we like to call the field, right? Some kind of
mhm,
field environment. And there's actions being taken. For example, that warehouse example, right? There's
mhm,
actions being taken that don't require like human interactivity. And they
mhm,
are, the other interesting thing, which I haven't mentioned, is that you have to build, you need to be able to build like small enough models, but that have high throughput and you can, because if you're running like you can, if you're in a warehouse or let's say you're somewhere out like in a
mhm,
fuel plant or chemicals plant, you may not be connected to a data center. You might be like running off of a satellite connection, or you might be running off of a low kind of throughput internet connection. And so you have to also like, often I found founders have built really like interesting ways of how to like compress models and
mhm.
be able to put them into like places where you're not going to have like the fastest internet connection.
Totally. Okay, so I want to be mindful of the time. So I have one last question. So, like I see when you mention edge computing and then you mentioned about like the device have to be small and stuff like that. I thought of like, the hardware AI space. So, last week in CS, people were talking about rabbit AI, like the tiny
Yeah,
red device. And then, prior to that, end of last year, people were starting talking about human AI pain. So obviously, like there's a market for AI driven hardware. I wonder what's your perspective on like that category of things, and then what are some challenges in the hardware space and the AI hardware space that you feel like are going to go through, and then do you
yeah,
see that as an opportunity?
yeah. And I'll caveat by saying that both myself and Stage 2 as a whole, like many software first investors, haven't spent as much time right in hardware. But on a personal note, I think that in every technological cycle, there are
Mhm,
hardware advances. And something we haven't spoken about today, but like there's an entire category of hardware advances at the chip level, right? And
mhm,
that's like taking a world of its own. And you see that now with NVIDIA, and they have probably the most advanced, chips that you can
mhm,
have for running inference and deploying kind of compute for AI models. So that's one aspect of hardware. The other end of the spectrum, what you're alluding to, is like consumer hardware and consumer interface with technology. And I think we're really early there as well, and we'll have to see what incumbents like Apple come up with. I'm not sure what types of AI capabilities are on the Apple Vision Pro.
mhm,
And then new startups like the Rabbit device that you were alluding to, right? Where it's a small form factor and
mhm,
it's interactivity just through, I think, audio that then connects to the internet and can help provide information or maybe complete certain tasks like I want to call an Uber, and I just like I talk to my device, it quickly calls an Uber, something like
mhm,
that. So I think folks will build new hardware. That's consumer, and then there's like industrial, which we spoke about earlier. I think there's going to be opportunity, and I think and I see, especially some of the maybe later stage investors at their growth stages are becoming more comfortable investing in hardware, especially if it's like a hardware software combo that works really well together.
mhm,
People are comfortable taking on, previously there was like risk of like hardware is going to be commoditized and what's the moat. But here, hardware software go together and you actually can have a moat. So we will probably see more of that over time. At stage 2, I'm not quite sure if we're set up for that. Hardware typically requires it's capital intensive and requires a lot of funding, and so some of the firms in the space that have the ability to deploy large amounts of capital behind these ideas are going to do a lot better. at our kind of size of and really focusing on like earlier stage and trying to focus on less capital intensive businesses, I think we'll look more for like the software layer. Right. And I think there will be software companies that will then partner with hardware companies or deploy onto specific hardware, and that'll be interesting. A good example is we've met a number of computer vision focused companies that are trying to build applications in industrial settings.
I really like that you separate them into like the consumer, and then there's like the hardware for industrial, and then like also like the software for the hardware is more interesting because of it's just less capital intensive. And on that note, thank you so much for coming. I noticed we passed our original like time that we set on. And then Anu, like you are such a pleasure to talk to. And can you give us all your socials so we can find you?
Yeah, I will follow up with you on those. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for coming to the Venture with Grace today.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Grace. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.